The barrel of his Henry rifle didn't waver. 5 riders sat their horses in his yard, dust still hanging in the air from their approach. The lead man, Cole Hartley, foreman from the Garrison Ranch, wore a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "We're looking for an Apache woman. Escaped property. You seen her, McKenna?" Silas McKenna stood on his porch, 40 yards between them, his thumb resting light on the hammer. Behind him, through the cabin door, he knew she was listening. Nolan, the woman who'd arrived half dead on his horse 2 weeks ago. The woman whose body he'd stitched back together. The woman whose presence had cracked something open inside him he thought was buried for good. "No," he said. Hartley's smile widened. "Mind if we take a look inside?" The hammer clicked back. One sound in the desert silence. "I mind." What happened next would decide if either of them lived to see sunset, but to understand how it came to this, how a man who'd sworn off the world found himself ready to die for a stranger, you need to know what happened the night his horse disappeared. Stay with me. This is a story about what we're willing to lose and what refuses to stay lost. September 1882, eastern New Mexico territory, where the land runs long and merciless under a sky too big to hide from. Silas McKenna lived 25 miles from Socorro in a cabin he'd built with timber hauled down from the high country. 3 years he'd been out here. 3 years since he'd buried his wife Margaret in Texas, her body wasted by consumption, his pockets empty of the medicine money that might have saved her. The war had taught him to kill. Watching her die had taught him that some things you can't shoot your way out of. So he'd come here to disappear. 160 acres under the Homestead Act, 12 head of cattle, 1 horse, a 9-year-old bay gelding named Ash, steady as stone, the last gift his wife had given him before the coughing started. That evening he checked the corral gate at dusk like he always did, tested the latch, ran his hand along the rope tie. Everything secure. Inside, he ate beans and hardtack, cleaned his rifle by lamplight, and turned in early. The wind was picking up, carrying the smell of distant rain. He woke to thunder and the high, piercing scream of a horse in terror. Silas hit the floor running, grabbing his Colt, his boots, nothing else. Outside, lightning split the sky white. The corral gate hung open, but the rope hadn't slipped. It had been cut, clean sliced through hemp, still swinging. 3 sets of footprints in the mud, headed east toward Apache country, and Ash's hoofprints, running hard, the stride pattern of a panicked animal. His stomach dropped like a stone down a well. He spent that night loading his Henry, packing supplies, planning which direction to track at first light. The horse was his livelihood, his transportation, his connection to Margaret. Without Ash, he was a man on foot in country that ate men. Foot. But more than that. And this was what kept him awake, staring at the ceiling. Losing the horse meant losing the last thing that mattered. And if he lost that, what the hell was he still breathing for? Dawn came gray and cold. He was cinching his gun belt when he heard it. Hooves, slow, uneven, labored. Silas stepped onto the porch, rifle ready. Ash emerged from the scrub like a ghost, head low, flanks white with dried lather, and draped across his back, unconscious, was a woman. An Apache woman. And she was bleeding. Silas stood frozen, his mind racing through implications faster than bullets. She wore what was left of a torn cotton dress, the kind given to Apache women in the work camps. Her arms were marked with bruises, old ones yellowing, new ones purple-black. Rope burns circled both wrists. Her left thigh was soaked dark with blood, and he could see the entry wound even from 10 feet away. Gunshot. Through and through, by the look of it. She was maybe 23, 24. Young, and she'd been hurt in ways that had nothing to do with the bullet. Ash stopped at the porch, blowing hard, his eyes rolling white. There was a graze along his ribs, another bullet, close enough to scar. Whoever had been chasing her had been shooting at anything that moved. The woman's eyes fluttered open, black as deep water. They fixed on Silas, on the rifle in his hands, and he watched her make a decision. She didn't beg, didn't speak, just waited for him to kill her or turn her away. Either one a death sentence. He should have done it. Should have put her back on the horse, pointed her toward the border, and washed his hands of it. Harboring a runaway Apache was a federal crime. The army would hang him. The ranchers would burn his place to the ground. And if whoever shot her came looking, and they would come looking, he'd have more trouble than one man with a rifle could handle. But as he stood there, feeling the weight of the choice settling on him like a wet coat, he saw something that stopped him cold. Ash was standing quiet now, head turned back toward the woman, watching her. Protective. That horse had never let a stranger touch him without Silas's say-so. Never. And Silas had learned, a long time ago, that horses knew things men didn't. He let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. "God damn it," he muttered and lowered the rifle. Getting her inside took effort. She was small, barely 100 pounds, but dead weight is always heavier than it looks. He laid her on his bedroll near the stove, cut away the dress around the wound, and assessed the damage by lamplight. The bullet had punched clean through the meat of her thigh, missing the bone and the big artery by maybe an inch. Lucky, but the wound was filthy, and she'd lost enough blood that her skin had gone gray. He worked fast, boiled water, poured whiskey over his knife and into the wound. She woke up screaming, a raw animal sound, and he had to hold her down with one arm while he dug out fabric and dirt with the blade. She bit down on a strip of leather, her eyes locked on his, and she didn't look away. Not once. When he was done, he stitched her closed with thread meant for saddle repair, his hands steady from years of field surgery during the war. She passed out halfway through. He sat back, hands shaking now that it was over, and looked at what he'd done. He'd just chosen her over every smart thing he knew. The first 3 days, she didn't speak, didn't eat. Just lay near the stove, watching him with those dark eyes, tracking his every move like a wild animal calculating escape routes. Silas didn't push. He set food on the table, beans, salt pork, bread, and went about his work. Fixed the corral gate, mended tack, kept the rifle close, listening for riders. On the morning of the 4th day, he woke to find the water bucket already full, sitting by the stove. The fire was going. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor, rewrapping her bandage with clean cloth she'd torn from his spare shirt. She didn't look at him, just worked, her fingers precise and steady. He poured coffee, set a cup near her, and went outside. When he came back an hour later, the cup was empty, the floor was swept, and she was sitting by the window, staring out at the land, her jaw set hard. That became their pattern. She moved through the cabin like smoke, quiet, purposeful, claiming space without asking permission. Washing dishes, grinding cornmeal, gathering stones from the yard to make some kind of paste she rubbed on her wound, the smell sharp and medicinal. Silas watched her work and realized she wasn't trying to earn her keep. She was proving she wasn't helpless, that she had value beyond being a burden. He left his old boots by her bedroll. In the morning, they were gone. She wore them the next day. Too big, but better than nothing. She nodded once. He nodded back. That was their first conversation. On the 8th night, she broke the silence. "Name?" Her voice was rough, unused. She was pointing at him. "Silas." He hesitated. "Yours?" "Nolan." The word sat between them like something fragile. He wanted to ask what it meant, where she was from, how she'd ended up on his horse, but the look in her eyes said those questions would cost more than he was ready to pay. Instead, he pointed at Ash, grazing outside. "Horse's name is Ash." Nolan's expression softened, just barely. She went to the door, stepped out barefoot despite the boots, and walked to the corral. Ash lifted his head, ears forward. She spoke to him in Apache, low, musical, words Silas couldn't understand, but recognized as gratitude. The horse leaned into her touch. Silas felt something shift in his chest, something that hurt and felt good at the same time. The 10th day, he came back from checking fence lines and found her at the water barrel behind the cabin. He'd thought she was inside, thought he was alone. She was washing, her back to him, the dress pulled down to her waist. Water ran down her spine, following the curve of her shoulders, the hollow of her lower back. Scars marked her skin, old ones, from things he didn't want to imagine. She turned her head, sensing him. Their eyes met. She didn't scream, didn't cover herself. Just stood there, water dripping, looking at him with something in her gaze he couldn't name. Challenge, maybe. Or test. Silas felt heat crawl up his neck. His mouth went dry. He turned away fast, his pulse hammering, and walked back to the barn like his boots were on fire. Behind him, he heard the softest sound. She was laughing. That night, he couldn't sleep. 2 weeks in, supplies ran low. Silas rode into Socorro at dawn, Nolan watching him from the cabin door. He told her to stay inside, keep the shotgun loaded. Told her if anyone came, hide in the root cellar and don't come out until she heard his voice. She'd nodded, but when he looked back from the ridge, she was still standing there, a small figure against the doorframe, and something about the sight made his throat tight. At Hewitt's general store, the old man behind the counter squinted at him. "Silas, been a while. Heard your horse ran off. Came back. Lucky." Hewitt tallied up flour, coffee, dried beans. Then, casual as anything, "You hear about the Garrison Ranch? They're looking for an Apache girl who escaped. Stabbed Frank Garrison, the foreman. Cut him up pretty good before she ran." He leaned in, voice dropping. "They're offering $50, dead or alive." Silas kept his face blank. "Haven't seen anyone." "Figured." Hewitt bagged the supplies. "But keep your eyes open. Word is she's wounded. Can't have gotten far. Probably holed up somewhere between here and the Diablos." Silas paid in coin, loaded the saddlebags, and headed to the saloon for information. Inside, 3 men sat at a corner table, loud with whiskey. He recognized the Garrison brand on their hats. "That Apache bitch can't hide forever," one was saying. "Boss wants her back to make an example. Says whoever finds her can have her first, long as she's breathing when we string her up." Laughter. The sound of it made Silas's hand drift toward his Colt. Another man. "Someone saw tracks near McKenna's place, that crazy hermit out east." "McKenna? That dried-up son of a bitch? Wouldn't know a woman if she bit him." More laughter. Silas finished his drink, kept his head down, and rode home hard. When he got back, Nolan was sitting on the porch steps, the shotgun across her knees. She stood as he dismounted, her eyes searching his face. He unloaded the supplies, carried them inside, then turned to her. "They're looking for you. 3 men, maybe more. They'll be checking ranches, cabins. Could be here in days." She didn't flinch. "I go." "Where?" His voice came out sharper than he meant. "Your people are scattered. The army's got camps everywhere. You go out there alone, you'll die, or get caught. Either way. You die if I stay." Her English was broken but clear. "They kill you." "Maybe. So I go." She started gathering her things, the blanket, the boots, a canteen. moving with the kind of calm that came from having run before. Silas stepped in front of the door. No. She looked up at him, and for the first time, her mask cracked. Why? Why you do this? He didn't have a good answer. Didn't have words for what was happening inside him. The way her presence had filled the silence of this place, the way watching her move through his cabin, had made him feel like less of a ghost. Because... He stopped, started again. Because if you leave, they'll find you, and I'll spend the rest of my life knowing I could have stopped it. Nalin stared at him, her eyes shining with something too complicated to name. Then she said quietly, "Tell me, why you here? Alone?" So he told her. About Margaret, the consumption, the way she'd wasted away while he watched, helpless. The grave in Texas he couldn't bear to stand near. The way he'd come here, to stop feeling anything at all. When he finished, Nalin reached out, slowly, giving him time to pull away, and placed her hand over his. Her palm was warm, calloused, real. "We same," she said, "both broken." And Silas realized she was right. That night they sat by the fire longer than usual. The air between them felt different, charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. Nalin was sewing torn cloth, her fingers working the needle with practiced ease. Silas sat across from her, cleaning his rifle, but he kept glancing up, watching the way firelight played across her face, the curve of her neck, the way her lips pressed together when she concentrated. She looked up and caught him staring. Neither of them looked away. Silas. His name in her mouth sounded different, softer. "Yeah. You..." She searched for words. "You good man. You saved me. I didn't do anything any decent person wouldn't do." "No." She shook her head, fierce. "Most men. They hurt. They take. You..." She touched her chest. "You see me. Not just body. Me." Something in Silas's chest cracked open. He set the rifle aside, moved closer. She put down the sewing. The space between them was maybe 3 feet, then 2. "Nalin." "I know," she whispered. "I know what you think. You think I'm broken. I am. But..." She reached up, touched his face, her fingers tracing the scar along his jaw. "You broken too." "Maybe. We fixed together?" He caught her hand, held it against his cheek. Her pulse beat against his palm, fast and alive. "I'm not..." His voice was rough. "I'm not good at this. Haven't been with anyone since..." "I know." She leaned closer. "Me too. Since they take me, I think. Never again. Never want man touch me." Her eyes met his. "But you different. You make me feel safe and more." Silas felt like he was standing on the edge of something vast. One step forward and everything would change. One step back and this moment would be lost forever. He chose forward. The kiss started gentle, barely there, just the brush of lips, a question asked and answered. Then Nalin made a small sound in her throat and pressed closer, her hands sliding up to his shoulders. And suddenly, gentle wasn't enough. He pulled her into his lap, her thighs bracketing his, her body warm and solid against him. She gasped against his mouth, her fingers tangling in his hair. His hands found her waist, the curve of her hips, pulling her closer. She froze. Silas felt it instantly. The way her body went rigid, the way her breathing changed from desire to something else. He pulled back. "What's wrong?" Her face was pale, her eyes distant. She swallowed hard. "Hands. On my hips. She couldn't finish. Understanding hit him like a punch to the gut. Garrison, the foreman, the other men. They'd held her down, hands on her hips, and, Jesus. He gentled his grip immediately, sliding his palms to safer territory. Her upper back, her shoulders. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. No. She gripped his shirt, fierce. Not your fault. I want this. Want you. But I... Tears shone in her eyes. Body, remember. Even when I tell it, you safe. Silas cupped her face in both hands, resting his forehead against hers. Then we go slow. However slow you need. Or we don't do this at all. You say the word, we stop, and nothing changes between us. She let out a shaky breath. You really mean that? Every word. She kissed him then. Soft, grateful, trembling. And they sat like that for a long time, just holding each other, breathing together, learning the shape of this new thing between them. When she finally pulled back, she smiled, small and fragile, but real. Tomorrow, she whispered. We try again tomorrow. Slow. Tomorrow, he agreed. She curled against his chest, her head on his shoulder, and they stayed that way until the fire burned low. Neither of them heard the hoofbeats approaching from the east. Not until it was too late. Silas woke to Ash screaming. He was on his feet instantly, Colt in hand, every instinct from the war snapping into place. Nalin was already awake, crouched by the window, her face tight with fear. How many? He whispered. 5, maybe 6. He moved to the door, looked through the gap. Dawn was just breaking, turning the sky the color of old blood. 5 riders sat their horses in his yard, spread out in a loose semicircle. Tactical positions. They'd done this before. The man in the center, Cole Hartley, Garrison's head foreman, urged his horse forward a few paces. McKenna, we know you're in there. Silas grabbed his Henry rifle, checked the load. 15 rounds. He glanced at Nalin. Root cellar. Now. No. She picked up the shotgun, her hands shaking but steady. I not hide while you die for me. Nalin. We together. Her voice was iron. You say that. Together. There wasn't time to argue. Silas stepped onto the porch, rifle held loose but ready. The morning sun was in their eyes, giving him a slight advantage. State your business, Hartley. You know damn well what we want. Hartley's smile was all teeth. The Apache whore who cut up Frank Garrison. She's here. We tracked blood and footprints right to your door. Don't know what you're talking about. That's funny. Hartley leaned forward in his saddle. Because my men saw smoke from your chimney every night for 2 weeks, and you bought extra supplies in town. Flour, cloth, women's things. His eyes narrowed. You've been real busy for a man who lives alone. Behind him, one of the riders, a kid, maybe 19, shifted nervously, his hand drifting toward his pistol. Silas's thumb rested on the Henry's hammer. This is my land. Legal homestead, registered and paid for. You want to search it? You bring a marshal with a warrant. Don't need a marshal for runaway property. Hartley spat in the dirt. That girl's stolen goods. We're taking her back. Over my dead body. Hartley's smile widened. That can be arranged. The moment stretched. 5 men. 6 guns. Silas could drop Hartley first, maybe one more before they scattered and returned fire. The kid looked green. He'd probably miss. But the other 3 had the look of men who'd killed before. The math wasn't good. Then Nayland stepped out onto the porch beside him, the shotgun leveled at Hartley's chest. Every man in that yard went still. She'd wrapped herself in one of Silas's shirts, her hair loose around her shoulders, her bare feet planted wide. The shotgun didn't waver. You want me? Her voice carried clear across the yard. Come take me, but he die first. Then me. Then I kill 3, maybe 4 of you before I go down. She smiled, and it was the coldest thing Silas had ever seen. Who dies first? You choose. The kid's horse sidled nervously. One of the other men muttered something. Hartley's jaw worked. His hand twitched toward his gun. Don't. Silas's voice was flat. level. The voice of a man who'd killed before and would do it again. "I've got 15 rounds in this, Henry. You'll be dead before you clear leather. Bet your life on it if you want." For 30 seconds, nobody moved. Then Hartley jerked his reins. "This ain't over, McKenna. We'll be back. With the sheriff. With the army. If we have to." "You do that." The riders turned and left, dust rising behind them. They left at first light the next morning. Silas packed everything they could carry: food, ammunition, blankets, his wife's silver locket that he'd kept in the bottom of his trunk. He turned the cattle loose, burned his land deed in the stove, and saddled Ash for a long ride. Mexico was 5 days south if they pushed hard. Past the border, American law couldn't touch them. It wouldn't be easy. They'd be strangers in a strange land, with nothing but what they could carry. But they'd be alive, and they'd be together. Nolin stood in the cabin one last time, looking at the space that had become her sanctuary. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "You lose everything because of me." Silas turned to her. This woman who'd arrived bleeding and broken, and somehow put him back together in the process. "I already lost everything that mattered once. When Margaret died, I came here to stop feeling anything at all." He took her hand. "You made me feel again. That's not losing. That's finding." She smiled, that small, fragile smile that was becoming more frequent, and kissed him, soft and sure. They rode south as the sun climbed high, 3 figures against the endless desert: a man, a woman, and a horse who'd chosen them both. At the border, Silas looked back once at the land he was leaving behind. Then Nolin's hand found his, and he looked forward instead. Ahead was uncertainty, danger, a future written in sand and hope. But for the first time in 3 years, Silas McKenna wasn't running from his past. He was riding towards something new, and that was enough. If this story moved you, leave a like and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Subscribe for more tales from the frontier, where honor, passion, and survival collide under an unforgiving sky. These stories live in you now. Share them. And remember, sometimes what we lose leads us to what we were always meant to find.